Good morning. It is terrific to be here. Thanks very much to GovExec, to the BOLD team. This is a great venue. I am from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also part of the Department of Commerce. So Lisa, go Commerce. That's a thing you can only say in Washington, D.C. So I'm here to talk to you today about how we in NOAA have broken the paradigm of how we have historically built our satellite systems. And I know that's going to sound a little esoteric, but go with me here. Okay, so NOAA's job is to protect lives, livelihoods, and the economy by largely by providing predictions, warnings, and watches for environmental events that are going to affect us. Meet Hurricane Durian. Durian propagated through the Caribbean this summer. This was a pretty intense Category 5 hurricane. When it made landfall in the Bahamas, the maximum sustained winds were 185 miles an hour. Peak winds were 220 miles an hour, and probably most of us haven't experienced that. So to calibrate you, 185 miles an hour is about the winning average speed for an Indy 500 race car. 220 is the max speed that car will achieve. The power behind these events is enormous. When that much wind blows across water, it creates, in this case, a 20-foot storm surge. So our job is to warn people that these kinds of events are going to happen so that they can take the appropriate precautions. In this case, we had issued warnings and watches 5 or 6 days in advance, giving all of the governments in the path time to evacuate and plan. But it isn't just hurricanes. In 2017, there were 17 disasters in the U.S. that cost each $1 billion or more. There were hurricanes, tornadoes, hailstorms, fires, floods, droughts, you name it. In fact, in 2017, just the billion-dollar disasters accounted for more than a $300 billion hit to the U.S. economy. Every sector of our economy depends on NOAA predictions and warnings to prepare. The energy sector has to know how much energy to produce and where it has to go. Agriculture needs to know when to plant, when to fertilize, when to harvest. Walmart needs to know, where do I have to put the generators and the shovels, right? So the entire economy depends on good warnings, watches, and predictions. And you need two things for good warnings, watches, and predictions. You need really good models, and you need a lot of observations. So I'm in the part of NOAA that makes the observations that feed all those models. This is the Gozar satellite. This is the satellite that made the observations of Hurricane Durian. I showed you on the first chart. This is the satellite itself is way over on the right-hand side of the image. The black panels to the left are the solar panels, and you can see the scale by the couple of folks who are working on the satellite. It's about the size of a coach bus, and that's about typical for NOAA satellites historically. This satellite took 15 years to build and launch. So think about that for a minute. How many of you can reach into your pocket and pull out a pager? How about a BlackBerry? A flip phone? Anybody? No. Okay. Think about what has happened in the world of technology in 15 to 20 years. That means we spent billions of dollars to launch a satellite, and as capable as it is not nearly as capable as it could be, or could have been, had we been able to insert new technology along the way, but we couldn't. Not only do we have, so we have that 15-year gap when technology kept progressing and did so without us. I also showed you that with the increase of environmental events, the stakes are very high. The demand for actionable information is very high. So when you've got rapidly increasing demand and rapidly increasing or improving technology that sort of reduces the barriers to entry, what happens? People realize there's money to be made. And in fact, that's what's happening. This chart is showing you what percentage of the Earth observations came from NOAA as a function of time. And you know, what you can see, it looks like the graphic got a little goofed up here, but in about 2000, so 20 years ago, we were responsible for about 1/5 of all of the Earth observations that went into and were available for warnings and watches. Fast forward to 2019, we are producing 2% of the available observations. The light blue bar represents the commercial sector coming in and making observations from space. The purple bar is other government observations. This is not just US, but this is international partners as well. So you can see that in the 15 to 20 years since we last initiated a new satellite program, the entire world has changed. Technology's changed, the availability of partners has changed, business models have changed. So my job was to figure out, again, high stakes game. You know, my folks are on the Florida coast right now. They're depending on us to not blow this, high stakes game, but the entire landscape has changed. So how do I make decisions about what to field next and how to do it? And that's where the NSOSA architecture came in. NSOSA is just the acronym for this study, and Secretary Ross in public the other day just said that is the worst acronym I've ever heard. And in my defense, I never expected my little study to cross the lips of the Secretary of Commerce, but there you go. So what we did in NSOSA was we took a step way back and we said, all right, what are we fundamentally trying to do here? And what are all of the options we have? So just to sort of walk you through this flow, over on the left, we wrote down what's important to us, what observations, atmospheric water vapor, sea surface temperature, land water content, all of those things. What observations do we have to make, how often, when, how well? And then we said, what are our other strategic goals? By the way, we've always designed our satellites around what observations they have to make. What's different here is we said we have other objectives. We called them strategic objectives. We said we want a satellite architecture that allows on-ramps of new technology. We want it to have smaller building blocks in budget space and in time, but in budget space so that we can make adjustments and try to flatten our budget. To build satellites like that one that I showed you, that takes hundreds of millions of dollars in budget swing, which is really hard to get through the budget process. So we established strategic goals, and we actually mapped out metrics. How would we know we achieved that goal? We had to think really hard about that. We also surveyed technology. With all of that input, we've developed hundreds of different constellation options. Different observations made in different orbits with different kinds of business models, different partners, and so forth. For every one of those constellations, we estimated the cost, and we scored it against what we said up front was important to us. That gave us a cost-benefit chart represented by that scatter plot you see down on the right. It's a standard cost-benefit chart. In a cost-benefit analysis, you want to be high and left, right? Low cost, high performance. And then what we asked ourselves is, for those constellations that competed well, or high and left, near that knee in the curve, what was it about those constellations that made them compete well? And we circled back and did some more fine-tuning. We went through this process several times. Every dot in that plot represents a full constellation of, in many cases, dozens of satellites. And that's how we learned what the attributes of our next generation architecture should be. In some cases, we should walk away from some observations we have been making to make room for new ones that will have higher impact on the mission. In some cases, observations that we have been making by building and fielding government satellites, we should buy from the commercial sector, or we should get from international partners for I'll use air quotes here, for free. And that is what's going to free up the headroom for us to make the high-impact observations that today we cannot make. So the future architecture will be comprised of smaller satellites, fielded more rapidly, with more partners, and a variety of different business models. And I'll just give you an example to contrast with that satellite I showed you on the first chart. So this is a satellite system, we've already started to move out on executing this. This is a satellite constellation that we launched this year. So now instead of being the size of a coach bus, this whole satellite is about the size of your oven. We launched a constellation of 6 of them. It was a partnership with the government of Taiwan, with the US Air Force and NOAA. So we built the payloads here in the US, we shipped them to Taiwan, they integrated with a satellite. That got shipped via diplomatic pouch back to the US, launched on Elon Musk's last qualifying commercial space launch vehicle, the Delta 9. It was his last launch to qualify for carrying national security payloads. So that all happened this year, and that's providing 4,000 high-quality atmospheric profiles a day. And on top of that, we executed a commercial weather data pilot because there are 3 at present different companies who've gotten into making these same kinds of observations through commercial constellations. So we purchased data from them. We're in the middle of that evaluation. But what I expect is that by this time, 2 years from now, we will have some portion of our observations coming from this international partnership mission, and many more coming from private sector providers, giving us a diverse portfolio of sources and leveling out the costs. So that's just one example of how we're moving forward. And I won't dive into all of the details of what we're doing next, but what I will say is when you know what you want to do and you have a rock-solid analytic case for doing it, amazing things happen. So we released a couple of broad agency announcements and had Industry Day earlier this fall, late summer. Instead of getting responses from a handful of companies, the kind of companies that are capable of building coach bus-sized satellites, we got dozens of responses. We have energized not just the private sector in bringing new solutions to us, but we've also energized our stakeholder community, the National Weather Service, the Ocean Service, and so forth, because they now see the things that were not possible just a few years ago are possible in their future. So, this methodology, this way of thinking through problems and optimizing the choices, this isn't new. I brought with me, just for effect, my highlighted and dog-eared copy of Smart Choices. This is a methodology that's been around for a long time. But this is the first time that I know of that the government has ever applied this to a massive, multi-decade investment decision. And we think it's going to be a change for the better. So thanks very much for your attention.